Hello, we are live from the 2023 California State Championships. Thank you for joining me. I hope you enjoy this video. Please like and subscribe. You'll be notified every time I upload a new video. Please let me know what you think in the comments. We have the chat feature here. In this video, we are at the 2023 California State Championships Backgammon Tournament. It's the final ABT tournament of the year. And in this video, we're doing a seminar with Frank Frigo, 2023 World Champion. This is the second time he's won the World Championship, and he's going to talk about his experience. So we will be starting shortly. And I will be back. So we are live. The stream has already started. It's my pleasure to have Mr. Frank Frigo. Welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Alex. Yeah.
Frank won the World Championship in 2023 this year, and it was the second time. The first time was 29 years ago. How many years ago?
1994.
1994.
Yeah, a long time ago.
So we're going to be having a seminar here at the California State Backgammon Championship in Los Angeles, and you're going to be discussing your experiences.
Yeah.
Let's give the viewers a preview of what we're going to talk about before the audience comes in.
Yeah, so I think we can talk about a number of things. It's, first of all, it's a wonderful experience to go to Monte Carlo and get to play backgammon in July. It's amazing, and it's a different tournament because the format is over the course of a week, and you typically play 2 long matches a day. So it's really a grind. And if you can, if you're fortunate enough to advance in the tournament, you really kind of have to think about the toll it takes. Because, when I won in '94, I think I had a bit more stamina back then.
You were younger.
I was a bit younger. I had my wife with me at the time, and my wife wasn't with me on this trip, but she kept me very grounded. This time I was fortunate to have my friend Michael Pines from San Diego with me, who did everything he could to keep me grounded, and I tried to stay to a very good routine. But so there's a number of factors. Obviously, you want to try to play technically as well as you can, but you're also sort of dealing with this stamina issue throughout the week, and you want to do everything you can to kind of get yourself in the best mental state. And that's a hard thing to do.
Right.
And I think a lot of players might underestimate how much that actually matters. I mean, if you were to graph, I think in general, the PRs of top players throughout the course of the week, you would definitely see a trend, a correlation as you get into the later rounds, because you become more prone to mistakes and so forth. So that's a battle that you try to do, and you got to really kind of stay grounded and stay true to a method and a decision framework to do that.
Yeah, and you're going to talk a little bit about the pre-bought era versus now, right?
Yeah. So it's interesting. I've had a chance to go back and look. The World Championship finals in '94, it was a 25-point match against Peter Thompson, fantastic player who actually placed this year. He was in the hunt this year. And he was he was younger than me then, and he had won the previous year and was undefeated when we met in the final. So he was on an incredible run. And it's interesting to look at that match, through the lens of the modern era. Putting that into XG, and you can see things that we just learned from the box. You didn't know that, and so there were these sort of slightly more imaginative plays that you would make, where now the bots have taught us to kind of tidy up. But it was actually a really good match. I mean, we both played in the 5s, which for the pre-bot era was at that point in time was pretty darn good. So I was pretty proud of that match, and but yeah, it was a different game then, and now you have so many good players because of the bots.
Right.
It's a catch-up game. I mean, I think I definitely play better now than I did then, but I think the overall field is very different, especially in Monte Carlo. I think you had a much more wide range of skill levels back in those days. So it's a different game, and there are no easy opponents anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, great. I'm looking forward to it. We should be starting shortly. Let me see if we can get an announcement. another topic we were going to talk about is inducing errors. If you want to just talk about that for a moment while I go check to see when we're going to start.
Sure,
Yeah.
I can talk about that. Yeah, so I think, we've gotten accustomed in, recent times with, it's all about playing the lowest possible PR, which of course is important. I mean, everybody should be striving to play the best technical game they can play. And you have to be very careful if you overthink it, overthink your opponent. I mean, there are times that there are absolutely exploitive plays to make moves that might be technically suboptimal or XG wouldn't like if XG knew it was playing itself. But sometimes there are times you can make a play that might be more likely to induce an error. And this is certainly true in opening play. And I experiment with this periodically, depending on my opponent and how likely I think they are to know the replies to certain plays. I might play something that is, technically XG wouldn't like, but it's much more likely to induce an error. And this also holds true with cube decisions. When you know you're in the range of a cube decision, and you're not quite sure whether it's a technical double or not. I mean, erring on the side of aggression generally pays pretty good dividends, because as XG will show you in the analysis, there is a percentage of time that if you get an error, it's a profitable action. So that's always something to be really conscious of. And whenever I talk to new players, like at our club in San Diego, I always say the biggest thing you can do to really advance your play is to err on the side of aggression. When you have borderline decisions, you're thinking about making a play that might win a gammon versus, not being as aggressive, err on that side of aggression, err on the side of a cube that might be more aggressive. And, usually those are pretty good actions because you just never know. Your opponent can't make a mistake unless they've got a decision. And when you present them with a decision, sometimes, you profit from that.
Okay. So, no, thank you. All right, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Alex Isagian. For those of you whom I don't know, if I don't know you, please come and say hello. It's a pleasure to meet you. It's wonderful to have you all here at the 2023 California State Championships. Thank you to Candace Mayron and Patrick Gibson for running this tournament. Thank you to everyone at the USBGF. I want to thank all of you for joining me. Really appreciate it. There are many other people. Martin Thurman's been helping us. At this time, it's a pleasure to have my friend, Mr. Frank Frigo, 2023 World Champion, and it's the second time he's won. Yeah. And in this talk, he's going to talk about his experiences. So if you would prefer to stand, you can stand, you can sit. We're going to talk about, we have a few topics to talk about, and I'm going to kind of moderate it, but Frank's going to talk most of the time. And we are live streaming on my channel.
First of all, thanks, Alex. You're doing like amazing content. I watch a lot of it. I love the position analysis, the short matches and that you do and so forth. So it's great. Should I sit? Is it?
How are you comfortable?
Okay, I'll grab a seat. Yeah, so love what you do, and yeah, looking forward to the talk. So yeah.
So we had a list of the topics, right? We were going to talk about the experience of playing in a long tournament like the World Championship. So.
Yeah, I mean, I know some of the folks in this room have been there and played and had some success. It's a different tournament. I mean, first of all, it's just great to be there. I mean, where else would you want to be but Monte Carlo in July playing backgammon? It's a different format. You have longer matches. You typically play 2 matches a day. And if you're fortunate enough to advance to the deeper rounds, it really starts to become a grind. And I was telling you earlier as we were sitting down, when I played in '94, it was my first time. I had a bit more stamina in those days. I was also in the super jackpot, and I had a pretty good run. I had won 12 matches in a row, and I think that was just like I was on autopilot, and I was sort of on cruise control. I was very fortunate. But this time around, I'm a little older, it's 29 years later, and the stamina was a bit different. So I really tried to make a concerted effort to, to not hang out in the tournament room, to stay to an exercise routine, not to eat big meals. And I have a problem with insomnia. So as I got later in the week, I was getting lower and lower on sleep. And Michael Pines, who was rooming with me this year, the first time around, my wife was with me. She kept me very grounded. This time, she couldn't join me, but Michael was really good at trying to keep me focused, and he could testify. I think I was like singing Italian opera in the shower, in a cold shower, a couple times just to try to get my dopamine going or whatever. But yeah, it's a grind. I mean, I'm not asking for anybody to feel sorry for me, but it's hard to really stay focused. I was pretty pleased, even in the later rounds, as difficult as it was. I thought my technical level was still pretty good under the circumstances. But yeah, just really tried to stay to a routine.
Yeah, that's great. I think I'd like to hear a little bit more about that. I think the other thing that would be good is if we make it a little interactive. If anyone has a question, just go ahead and raise your hand. But this year, it's like a whole week, the tournament, right?
It is. It's a whole week. Yeah. I mean, I got there early, played the Monte Carlo Open, tried to acclimate a bit, and then basically 2 rounds a day. So you start with 17-point matches, usually one in the afternoon, one in the evening, and then when you get down to the later rounds, it goes. So the undefeated final was 19, and then the final, which now is not it's not double elimination in the final. So it was 1 match and done. So when I played Mario, it was a 21-point final. So not, in 94, it was a single elimination tournament. The early rounds were 17. The first 2 rounds were 17. Then it was 2 rounds of 19, 2 rounds of 21, 23, 25. But, this was still, it was 8 matches. So it was eight matches in both cases to win it. Yeah.
How many people do we have in the audience who've attended that tournament?
Quite a few.
And I haven't been there, but I'd love to go. It's hard for me. I know it's really enjoyable.
It's great, and I really hope they keep it in Monte Carlo. It's such a great tradition. A lot of people talk about, well, we need to move it around in different cities, and there's some good ideas around that, certainly, and people talk about the expense of it, and there's no question Monte Carlo is an expensive place. The Fairmont is very nice, but there are options. I'm not encouraging people to not stay at the Fairmont because it's a wonderful experience, but I've stayed in an Airbnb in Beau Soleil before. There's wonderful little cafes. It's really not any more expensive than traveling to most tournaments. So I would encourage everybody, if you haven't been, to go, and I really hope they keep it there because I think it's a wonderful tradition dating back to the 1970s.
How many times have you attended this tournament?
This was my 9th.
9. Yeah. So you're 2 out of 9.
I'm 2 out of 9, and I got to the undefeated quarterfinals in 2002, and I lost to Felix Ziva, who ended up getting to the finals. So
that's pretty good.
Yeah, I've had some good results there. Yeah.
My friend Phil Simborg has a question.
No, at one point they just 2 days ago they signed the contract for 2024 again at the Fairmont. So
excellent.
It's set.
Do they have the date set?
Yeah, I talked to Mark Olson. It's set. But the other question I had is, it 1256 the magic number? Does anybody in this room know the significance of that number? And then you can tell us why it's important to you.
Let me,
the right date.
1066.
1066.
Let me repeat.
Jake is out that money. He knows what that date is.
Let me repeat the question. Yeah. So just so the camera can hear it, Phil asked the question about the significance of the number. Is it 1066? 1066. What is that?
So it's just kind of a goofy thing. The first year I went to the tournament, my wife and I stayed at what was then, it was Lowe's then. Yeah, so I remember getting to the room. I think it was a key, not a card then. And I remember opening the door, and I sort of looked up. Well, I had the room number, and I looked up, and it was 1066. And I just said to my wife, I said, "Ooh, this is a good omen, the Battle of Hastings." So, not that really meant anything, but I just sort of, it stuck in my head. So the funny thing was, this year they were doing construction at the Fairmont, and Michael Pines and I were staying on the end of the building where the construction was. It sounded like a drill, an auger was coming through the wall. So we called the front desk and said, well, we need to move. So we ended up moving down to the same level, the first floor level, which is below the main level. And as we were walking down the hallway, there was 1066, and I told Michael the story. So every day I would walk past that room to the elevator, and I'm not a superstitious person. This is all just in fun. But every day I would walk past it, I would give it a little tap on the door. And I don't know who was staying in the room. They were probably wondering, who's this creepy guy tapping on my door every day. But anyway, it was just kind of a fun thing, and I know Phil got a big kick out of that.
So one of the topics we wanted to discuss is nowadays you guys watch these streaming videos and there's always an XG feed or something like that. But back then they didn't have that. So we want to talk a little bit about the difference between the pre-bought era and the current era in terms of playing, watching the World Championship and everything.
Yeah, I mean, in the pre-bought era, you really had to do the hard work. I mean, I wasn't really kind of an internationally known player then. I played a decent amount in the U.S., but I used to spend a lot of time doing rollouts and study and so forth, and played a lot of matches back in those days. The bots. I mean, the overall level of play has obviously improved quite a bit, but the bots have been the great equalizer. I think you had a lot more spread across skill levels back in '94, and it's fun to go back and look at matches. Chuck Bauer, my friend, who a lot of you know, has been doing some studying of looking at pre-bot era matches with XG to see who was really playing well back in those days, and it's fascinating. I mean, when you see McGrill or Jason Lester playing at these very impressive PRs before they even knew there was a bot. It's amazing to see, really, because there are just some things that we take it for granted now, but the bots have taught us to make overly conservative plays or stack up in certain situations, when in the pre-bot era you're always looking for imaginative plays. I think the quote from Barclay Cook in one of the old books was, I don't have anything to base this on, but I suspect that architects make poor backgammon players, because if you stacked up something you were obviously missing, you needed to do something more imaginative. The bots have taught us otherwise. You play very aggressively for gammon. Sometimes when you're ahead in the race, it's okay to make an ugly play. And in the pre-bot era, that wasn't such a common thing. So going back and looking at those matches, fortunately, I think it was Harold Yohani recorded the finals in '94 between me and Peter Thompson, and it was a 25-point final, and I've been able to run that through XG analysis. And there's definitely some imaginative plays woven in there, but it was actually by modern standards was a pretty good match. I think I mentioned it earlier. We both played in the fives, which in the pre-bot era was a pretty good result.
Outstanding.
Yeah, but yeah, it's a different game now. And quite frankly, when the bots came in, I didn't like it that much. And I really started to kind of lose interest in the game for a number of years, because I kind of felt like it was leveling the playing field too much. But then at some point, I just sort of embraced it as a tool and just said, you know what, I'm just going to try to improve. And I think I'm a better player than I was then because of the bot, but I think that the overall field has gotten much, much better.
Jake, do you have a question?
Back in the pre-bot era, most of the really good players came out of very, very few places. You had the New Yorkers who gravitated toward the Mayfair Club. You had Boston, you had Chicago, you had LA. And that was because there was interaction between the strong players. Who, when you were coming up, who were some of the people that you were bouncing ideas off of?
Well, so I started playing in Chicago at local tournaments, right? And I remember Chris Stanford, was when I first started playing was dominating the Chicago, gammons of Chicago and so forth. I don't know by modern standards how good he was, but I think when I moved to San Diego and San Diego had a pretty good club back in the 1980s, and Mike Fujita played there. Neil Kazaros was living in San Diego at the time, and Neil and I, we would play for money. We would play at the tournaments, and he was a real student of the game, and we used to start, we were bouncing ideas off of each other. So that was kind of a time when I started to think about it a bit more. And then I'm trying to think of other people. Obviously, I met Chuck Bauer much later, but Chuck is so passionate about the game, and to this day, I talk to him 3-4 days a week, and he's always sending me problems, and vice versa. But yeah, I'm sure there were some others along the way.
What about Louisville?
Louisville had a pretty good club. It had one of the biggest tournaments in the country on Labor Day once upon a time. When I moved to Louisville, there were a number of good players. Quentin McTeer was clearly the best player when I moved to Louisville. Who just, by the way, passed away a couple of weeks ago. I was at his memorial service. Great guy. But we had a number of different players. And I was telling Julius earlier that I don't know if any of you remember Harold Branch, but Harold was a great guy. He used to write the Louisville Gammon Gazette. And a funny story, I mean, he hated the bots when they came out because he did manual rollouts. He was a pioneer of manual rollouts. And he used to watch Cubs games and do these long rollouts in his kitchen table. His wife was ill and he couldn't leave the house. So he'd call me up and say, "You want to come over and play some backgammon?" And he would do these, like, I think he did 128 rollouts or something like that. And I kid you not, his kitchen table, it was a wood table with a pad and a tablecloth. He did so many rollouts, his elbow wore a hole through the tablecloth and actually took varnish off of the wood. That's how many rollouts they did. And if you can ever find those old newsletters that he used to do, you know, he would do rollouts of Roberti's problems, and then he would tell Roberti that he got it wrong, and Roberti didn't want to have any of that. But he was a great guy. He died, probably like 30 years ago. Yeah. Yeah.
So another topic you wanted to talk about was the topic of inducing errors in certain plays. So tell us about that, and then we'll have some questions.
Yeah, I mean, I'm generally super interested in critical thinking and decision science, and I've kind of made a career out of this. And you know, it's a topic you have to be really careful of. I mean, there's no question, you know, if you strive to play lower PRs, that's a good thing, right? I mean, there are times though where knowing your opponent, you know, the inducement of errors matters. You can play different openings that XG would think are slight errors, but if you know your opponent may not know the responses, you can profit from those actions. But it's a fine line because, you know, when you try to strive towards exploitive play, you can end up exploiting yourself, and a lot of people do cross that line. But I think it's important. And when I teach new players, I'm not a backgammon coach, but when I talk to players like at the San Diego Club about playing, I said the biggest gain you can make in your play is when you have difficult decisions to err on the side of aggression, right? If you're on the fence about, do I make a more aggressive play to go for the gammon? Should I cube? Should I not cube? Should I take? Should I not take? And we're all wired with a cognitive bias of risk aversion. I don't care how well trained you are, we all are susceptible to it. And if you sort of know this, and you don't otherwise have good objective data to override your decision process, if you're on the fence, it's typically right to go for slightly more aggressive plays. And particularly with cube actions, when you're thinking about doubling, I mean, I know for myself, my biggest mistakes will be when I get too conservative with the cube and I let somebody off the hook. A lot of good things happen when you cube, right? You're getting more leverage, and you just don't know if your opponent's going to pass. I mean, when you do the analysis, you can see XG will post it. It does a risk-reward analysis, and it'll show you the percentage of time that if your opponent makes an incorrect decision, that you need for them to make an incorrect decision for you to profit from the action. And that's really important. When you know you're sort of in the range of a cube decision, you're giving your opponent an additional decision which they have to react to and which they can potentially blunder, and it's really important. So I think again, it's something that you've got to be very careful with, because you can end up exploiting yourself.
What questions do we have from the audience? Go ahead, Phil Simborg, please.
When you're watching a major match that's being streamed, would you rather have the XG feed or not?
I would rather not have it. I think it's great afterwards to do the analysis. I like it when the commentators are put on the spot as if they were sitting across the board, because it's amazing how you can overfit data. Once you know the answer, boy, you can come up with all the really good reasons it happened. And I think it's more interesting to the audience to listen to a top player comment about what they would do over the board. But that being said, it would be great on the recording or on a separate feed to do the XG, because it's really educational. Yeah, that's my opinion. Others may feel differently.
Other questions? Go ahead. I'm pulling up a position that we're going to.
The commentary in your first final in '94.
Kent Goulding, and he was talking about how horrible I was playing. Yeah. And meanwhile, sorry, I'm going to rip on Kent for a second. I have gone back and looked at some of his old matches in the prebought era. No, Kent's great, but yeah, he was doing the commentary and they had like a whatever, like a feed just in the room, and they had kind of a separate audience doing it. Yeah. But it was funny because Jason Lester and Wilcox came up to me after the match and said, in our opinion, that was one of the better finals that we've ever seen played in Monte Carlo. So that meant something. Yeah.
Who did the commentary in your last one?
Yeah. What is that? I'm trying to remember.
I got a question for you. I'm really impressed with what you and Michael Pines have done with the San Diego club. Could you tell us how that's grown and how you did it?
That was the next topic. Thank you for asking.
Yeah, so I hope if any of you are in the vicinity, come join us. We've got a great club. We play in La Jolla at the Embassy Suites, and I mentioned earlier, I played in San Diego in the 1980s, and Gary Oakes ran it, Mike Fujita ran it, and it was a really good club. And that's where I met Neil originally and Mike, and but over time, I had moved away from San Diego. I think they were still playing there for a while, but it kind of started to die down. So when I moved back 3 years ago, we were just playing some chouette, Alan Tish and I, and a couple other guys, and we kind of talked about, well, we got to get the club going. But Michael is a very passionate guy. When he gets his mind onto something, and I kind of said, we ought to get it going again. It'd be fun to have a tournament. And I said, well, I'll help get this thing organized and going, but I don't necessarily want to be the long-term director. So anyway, one thing led to another. I mean, I won't go into everything that we've done, but one of the first things we did is I wanted to make a really provocative poster. So my daughter did this amazing acrylic painting of a fantasy chouette, and it was it's Charles Darwin, Lucille Ball, Thomas Jefferson, and Bob Dylan playing backgammon. And she's like, Dad, what am I doing? Like, why am I doing this? So she made this acrylic painting. It's really beautiful. Someday we're going to auction it off as a fundraiser. And we had and then she made the poster out of it. And if you walk down the streets of La Jolla, good luck not seeing that poster posted somewhere. Michael literally walks the streets and sticks that poster up. And it's amazing how many people have come to our tournaments because they've seen that poster. It's great. In fact, Michael lives on a very beautiful house on a very nice street, and he actually has a yard sign of the poster. 2 surfers heading down to the beach have seen the sign, and they've shown up. Now they come to our tournaments regularly. True.
How many people do you get?
We're averaging like in around 30-ish, and we've had, since we started in January, we've had 200 people show up. Yeah, it's been great. And our goal was to really create a sense of community that everybody from beginners to expert players could have a place to come, but we didn't want people to feel intimidated. So I think we do a pretty good job. We do name tags, we remember people's names, thank them for coming. We do little educational stuff, and everybody really enjoys it. So we're going to have our club championship on January the 13th, and I think we're going to get a really good turnout. It's been great. Yeah.
I can add something to that I've seen Michael do too, is that he is amazing with outreach, personal outreach. Like Michael sends a text on Tuesday before the tournament every week to everybody that's come to the tournament. He also sends emails, follows up. I think I get 2 direct communications from Michael every week, and I haven't been to the tournament in like 2 months. So,
yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah, for me, that's one thing that really helps me remember or to know, because I travel so much. I'm like, oh, Wednesday tournament in San Diego, So I think that Michael's personal touch to all that really.
By the way, I mentioned 2 surfers have shown up to our tournaments. I forgot Cody. That's 3 surfers.
Where can we see the poster? Is it online someplace?
It's online. Go to SanDiegoBackgammon.com. Yeah, and we should. I should have brought some with me.
Who won in that chouette?
Who's the fish?
In our weekly chouette?
No, the one with Charles Darwin.
So
Darwin was the
so by the way, I'm gonna give another plug real quick. If any of you have been on the Instagram page Schmidt Brothers Backgammon, Eric Schmidt is going to be here. He lives near Santa Barbara. He and his brother used to make beautiful boards. I found him online. Now he refurbishes old boards, and I got in touch with him, and he's going to come down here and bring a few of his boards. I think he'll be here tomorrow. I'm giving him a crystalloid board because what he does is he cuts the old cork out and makes these beautiful refurbished boards. And speaking of Darwin, I've had this idea for a while. I don't know how many of you know this, but Darwin was a fanatical backgammon player, and he kept intricate records every afternoon. He was very regimented, played with his wife. And his original board is at Down House, the museum where he lived with his family south of London. And they have in his parlor the original board design. So Eric Schmidt is going to take this crystalloid board that I brought, cut the cork out, and he's going to do a replica of Darwin's board. So if it, maybe we'll do more of them.
While we're on the subject of marketing, what is it that you love about backgammon vis-a-vis all the other great games like poker and such? Like when you're just pitching it to somebody, how do you sell it?
Oh man, there's so many reasons. First of all, I love the aesthetic of it, the beautiful board, the sound, the feel. I mean, that's a big attraction for me. I like the way the checkers click on the wood. It's a great game. It has so many active decisions. I mean, in poker, a lot of being a good poker player is kind of biding your time and observing what's going on around the backgammon has a lot of interactive decisions, which I like. And it's a person sitting across the board from you. As I mentioned earlier, I've kind of made a career out of critical thinking and decision science in a number of areas, from professional football to a number of different applications in analytics. I'm fascinated with decisions and uncertainty, thinking probabilistically, and backgammon is just such an amazing way to capture this. You can learn so many things from playing backgammon because, talking about Darwin, I might be going out on a limb here, but I suspect I'm not. A lot of people write about Darwin playing backgammon and think, well, he was probably doing it as a diversion while he was so intensely involved in writing on the origin of species, and this was a way for him to get his mind off the game. I suspect there was something more to it. I think his idea of, natural selection and random mutation, I think he was either potentially attracted to the game because of the randomness of the dice and shaping it, or we could even go further. It might have even inspired him a little bit to kind of think about what was going on with random mutations. That's my theory. I'm going to stick to it. But I kind of find it fascinating in that way. I mean, I just love that there's, it's this way you're trying to lasso chaos constantly. And I just find it fascinating because you can't quite get your hands around it, but it's a great intellectual pursuit. I mean, people say, well, how much skill and luck is there in backgammon? I'm like, well, with the exception of forced moves, there's a lot of skill. Every decision is a skillful decision. The question is, how much does it actually affect the result? So as an intellectual pursuit, it's an amazing game. I think there's more lessons to be learned for kids. I mean, I know Phil's a proponent of this, teaching it in schools as a better game than chess. And I agree with that because it's more like life. You can't control everything. You're getting dealt, your best laid plans get knocked aside, and you've got to say, okay, how do I minimize my losses? How do I maximize my gains? I don't know. I think we're all fortunate. It's just an amazing game, and it's played in great locations, and what's not to like?
Yeah. Let's go.
Yeah,
Blake and then Phil.
I'd like some examples of what you term, moves that would entice your opponent into making mistakes. There was a great in New York. There was an old-time Greek backgammon player who always used to make with 6-4. Used to make the 2-point, And McGreal, who I knew early days, would laugh at him, and he, in his early book, he would call it the Guianus point, his first book, as a typical backgammon mistake. So just an homage to him, I always do that. But I think about some people do not know how to respond to that 6-2, and they like on a 3-4.
The 6-4, you mean?
Yeah, 6-4, yeah. And they make mistakes in response to that. And
absolutely.
so,
I mean, you got to be really careful how you split into that, right?
Right. That's right. They often like a 3-4, they'll split into that, and it's not,
Yeah.
it's just endangering you.
Yeah.
Before you answer it, I just want to repeat the question for the camera. The question is an example of a position where you would induce a mistake, and you mentioned the opening 6-4 making the 2-point.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's a really good example. I mean, I've experimented with this where I've looked at, all of the openings and then sort of ranked the responses to see which ones have potential for, that where the responses aren't that clear to a lot of players and how much those differences are. And if you're not giving up a lot on the front, again, you got to be careful with this stuff, because if you're playing somebody who knows how to respond and you're giving up value, you're exploiting yourself to some degree. So you have to tread carefully. But yeah, I mean, that's an example. I mean, sometimes depending, I mean, even not in a gammon go situation, sometimes I'll tinker with 2 down with a 5-4 just to kind of develop more of a blitz structure, just to see how my opponent responds to that. There's other examples. I know we won't go through all of them, but yeah, I mean, there's, certainly on the opening plays, there's some places for that.
Are there any plays that you were in the finals that you were that you can remember that were like countered into
Plays from the finals.
Well, there was one that was talked about a lot. I mean, I was in a really bad spot against Victor at 18-14 Crawford, and I was in a desperate mode to make a counter prime. And I ended up making this, like, I don't know if some of you might remember it, a very big play where I broke my midpoint, which was, XG didn't like it, because but at the time, my thought process was I had to play super aggressively to get the counter prime. It worked out well. I'm not necessarily saying I condone what I did, but it was a bit of an imaginative play at that moment in time. I mean, this time around, I had so many close matches that went to DMP and so forth. And in the quarterfinal against Johan Benell, good Swedish player, we had an 8 cube that ended the match. And that was technically not a redouble on my point. And I knew I was in the vicinity of it. And to my earlier point about inducement, I wasn't 100% sure he was going to take it. And I think if I would have thought it through, I was certainly capable of doing the math to know if that was a cube or not a cube. But in the moment, considering the clock and just the moment that you're in, being able to kind of patiently do all that calculation, I knew I was in the vicinity. And I will always look up across the board to see if I can pick up any body language. And I wasn't sure if he was going to take or not. So at some point, I just said, I'm going to ship it. He took it, which in that case, I mean, if he rolled the set, I was going to lose the match. I mean, but I asked him after the match, I said, were you 100% going to take that cube? And he said, yeah. So, now over the board, I don't know if that's really true or not, but yeah, so that was a pretty memorable moment, because I think everybody groaned a little bit when that 8 cube shot across the board, and I was like, well, I got to take a shot. But that was, I'm sure, the biggest match of his life, right? So that's another thing. It's one thing, if you're playing online or at a local club, you're playing in the quarterfinals of Monte Carlo. I want to give my opponent another decision, right? Because you just don't know how judgment can get clouded in that. You want to put pressure on your opponent. So, yeah. So technically, XG dinged me on that one, but I'm okay with it. Yeah.
Well, we're gonna actually have one position from the finals that we'll talk to. So we'll have one more question before we do that. Phil Simborg, please.
Can you tell us something interesting about the last 4 Super Bowl champions?
So not 4, but yeah. So Chuck Bauer and I built a model originally called Zeus, and we formed a company around it. It's a simulation model originally to aid coaches into making better in-game decisions, and we've licensed it since we started it. We've licensed it to, I think, 12 NFL teams. The Kansas City Chiefs used it in both of their Super Bowls. The Philadelphia Eagles used it in theirs. The New York Times ran a feature article the day of the Super Bowl about Doug Peterson and the Philadelphia Eagles when they won that Super Bowl in 2017, about, if you've noticed the Eagles aren't playing like every other team, there's a reason for this. It's a little company in Louisville, Kentucky that's behind this. And then they went out that night, and to use the backgammon analogy, they played basically a 0 PR in the Super Bowl. I mean, it was fascinating. They followed it to the T. And the reason that they did is because the owner, Jeff Lurie, he was the first owner to sit at the table with us. And he told Doug Peterson, he told his general manager that follow the math. I'm not going to second guess you. Don't worry about the press. Don't worry about anything. Follow the math. And Peterson did. And they had great success with it. So that, yeah, that was a real proud moment for us.
Great, great. So we're going to be wrapping up soon, but we wanted to show one position. So I'm going to pull it up here, and we'll project it. All right, so this is, I switched it around. So Frank was playing the red checkers at the bottom, and this was against Mario Cool, right?
It
Cool.
was, yeah, that was
the
final
white
final.
checkers at the top. This is a different board. This is for those interested. This is the Gammoner X22 Paul McGreal Memorial Board made by Rain. If you're interested in that, he has some great boards. In any event, this was a 21-point match. Frank was leading 7-3. So that's 14 away, 18 away. And Frank has a 4-3 to play here. So everyone take a moment, look at the position, think about how you would play it, and then we'll look at the analysis. Frank does have an anchor on the 21 point, but so does Mario on the opposing 21 point. The pip count is shown here. It's 120 for red, 130 for white. So red is leading by 10 pips before the roll, so it'll be 17 pips after the roll. So let's ask the audience, what are the thoughts on how you would play this 4-3 here? The cube is in the center. I didn't mention that. Anybody?
I think 2 down.
2 down, 13, 9, 13, 10. What else?
9-5, 6-3.
9, 5, 6, 3. Jake?
21-14.
21-14. Okay. Anybody else have?
Stack up 9-6, 9-5.
9-6, 9-5. All right, so let's take a vote. Who would bring 2 down? Don't worry, you're not on camera. 2 votes for 2 down. The other one was 9-6, 9-5. How many votes for 9-6, 9-5? 2 votes. 21-14. Wow, that's a lot of votes. I can't count that high.
That's because Jake said it.
Yeah. And then
Let them all down the garden.
what was
path.
the other one?
Find out.
Was there another one?
There was somebody said 9-5-6-3.
Oh, 9-5-6-3. How many votes for that? All right. So maybe I'll have Frank talk about it, and then we'll look at the XG analysis.
I remember the play well. I made a bit of a knee-jerk play, which was the clean play of 9-6, 9-5. And I think the problem with that play is, you see, I've left myself 2 stripped points, abandoned points. And I think the real key to the position is that white has an extra checker on the midpoint, which affords some flexibility. So what you're looking at here is like, well, do you want to leave a shot? Because we're kind of reaching a critical moment of the game where a shot could basically end it. And I think I probably moved this one too quickly. I definitely did not consider 21-14. That was not in my choice list. I did think about 13-6, and I did think about 2 down. I didn't like 2 down because of the hit escaping from the anchor. So I was considering 13-6 for sure. And I don't know if you want to divulge the answer. We can.
Sir.
Okay, so I have a good question. So with plays like this, and now that you talk about your experience with playing in the World Championships and things like that, so obviously if you played for a while, you kind of know people, and it talks about in a lot of books that's been written, they talk about how you kind of know people's personality, so you have rationalization. So there's different rationalizations for different plays. So it's not Monday morning quarterbacking because you don't know the answer. But in your mind, obviously there's a lot of emotion when you're playing the championship. So would you consider how would my opponent respond when you're playing a particular opponent when facing plays like this, when you're playing it from like high pressure, like in a high stakes event?
Yeah,
Not a
adjusting.
high stakes event, but like a top tier event.
Adjusting to the opponent. I think that's important. I'll let Frank answer that in a moment. I think when you're playing the top level in the World Championship, I think you're just going to try to play the best play you can. What do you think, Frank?
I would agree. I mean, actually, Mario Gill is an amazing player, is evidenced by how he played in the match. So I wouldn't have adjusted there. I mean, There could be situations where against certain opponents, I'm, if I thought they were more or less likely to cube, I might, kind of factor that in. If I had some read on, how aggressive or passive they might be. But yeah, that wouldn't be the case in this match. I would just be looking for the best.
It's 7-1 to 21.
7-3.
7-3. 14 away, 18 away.
You're leading 7-3.
Yeah.
So that's an important thing to consider always in a match. Okay, so we'll look at the answer. The best play, I think there was a rollout. This is not a rollout, but 13-10, bringing 2 down is the best play, like this, and it results in this position.
I did lead you down the garden path.
Yeah, we're gonna look at that too.
I think 13-6 is almost a tie.
Yeah, that was a tie. So let me show you here. 13-6. This moving one from the 13 to the 6, resulting in this position, is virtually tied. 21-14 looks like this, and that's the wrong idea. I know, like, you are duplicating the 2s to hit, but I think what's your analysis?
Well, my analysis there is you're just inviting that big stack on the 6th point to have a purpose, right? But you're duplicating the 2, but it's sort of inviting those awkward checkers there to do something, and obviously, then the game can pivot very quickly. So you tend to not want to do that sort of thing. The other thing about it is, the 9 point as a blocking point has value, right? You don't just want to give that up too quickly. But I think the key to this position is not to just be thinking about short-term saving, but to think about how the game's going to develop. And again, I go back to looking at it. I think that extra checker that white has on the midpoint is really the key to the decision. If you move that checker and strip the midpoint, I think you'll see that the order changes a little bit.
Did I do that in the video?
You might have. Yeah, you did it. By the way, you did a great analysis. Yeah.
So I did a position analysis on a number of these, including this position from the World Championship. So I looked at this in more detail. You can kind of go back and look at that on my YouTube channel. But this was, I find, was an interesting position. Does anyone have any comments or questions about this position?
Yeah, was it a blunder or not to do your move, Frank?
I don't know if it was technically a.
What did you do?
I played 2 in. I think it was like 7 or something like that.
Oh, yeah. 9-6, 9-5.
9-6, 9-5. Yeah.
53.
Yeah.
It's a Japanese blunder.
Is that what they call it? Yeah.
All right. So let's see. We have about 5 minutes left. Let me close this and then go back. We'll go back onto Frank. There we go. Okay. So thank you to Frank for joining us. I appreciate that. Before we conclude, do we have any final questions? I know the tournament's going to start in a few minutes. Yes, ma'am. Gigi, go ahead.
When you're playing a long match like that, do you ever find, partially through it or whatever, that you tend to like slow down a little bit and like, I'm just speaking from experience of playing. For me, the longest match I played is a 13-pointer, and I just start to phase out. And how do you keep it up?
It's hard. It's really hard. I forget to eat, and some of those matches took like 4 or 5 hours. So I would actually, this doesn't quite directly answer your question, but I would actually put like a banana and some bars out, because if I saw them on the table, I'd remember to eat something along the way. Because otherwise, I would, I'd go out and get in this. I'd go out and get an espresso. I got in time trouble quite a bit, because you think you've got so much time. At the start of a 17-point match, you've got 34 minutes of reserve, and that seems like a lot. And then there I am, 4 or 5 hours later, and I got 30 seconds on my clock. And I think Joe Russell during the commentary joked about it, because I had told him that when I get to 40 seconds, I treat it like I've got no time on my clock, because I just get paranoid that I'm going to run out of time. It's an uncomfortable feeling to be in. I think I play okay under speed conditions, but you don't like to be there in a big match. So, it makes sense to sort of pace yourself a little bit. And I do take selective breaks. I mean, one of the things that I did do in the final is I got so low on time, but I knew the referee told me I had 2 breaks left. So as I got later in the match, I actually took a couple of consecutive breaks because I wanted to just pause and think about match equities, so I didn't have to do it over the board. At one point, I'd taken my second break, and the referee came over. He's like, "Are you okay?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm fine. I'm just trying to, within the rules, take advantage of everything that's afforded me, so I didn't have to potentially burn as much energy on the clock." So it was nice to be able to do that. I didn't get my phone out or a pen and paper or anything. I just sat and thought about it. Yeah.
Well, great. Thank you very much to everyone who's attended. Thank you to Frank. I really appreciate it. Big round of applause.
Thanks. Appreciate it. Yeah, it was fun.
So the tournament's going to be starting shortly. They're going to have Calcutta tomorrow morning at 8:45. We're going to be having a different thing. We're going to be doing a quiz. I set up a back game quiz. We're going to have, it's about 12 questions. The winner's going to win a copy of my book, and then I'll have a book signing for everyone who's interested. Thank you again to Frank, Patrick, and Candace, and everyone at the USBGF for organizing this tournament. Thank you to everyone who attended, and thank you to everyone who's watching the live stream. And we'll see you throughout the weekend.
Thanks. All right. I appreciate it.
Very much.
Where do I get these?
These are like online. I'll put out the link.
Okay. Cool. Well done. Thanks. Appreciate it.
I was watching on the stream.
Oh, okay. Did it come across okay?
Oh, it's perfect. No,
Yeah,
I mean, when you
so
shared the board and everything.
So it'll be on your channel on YouTube?
This one is, yeah.
Yeah.
So thank you everyone for joining. We'll go ahead and conclude this. I appreciate that, and we'll have some more hopefully later.
Yeah, I'm always on there.
Oh my God. Are you in? Yeah, long time.
Yeah. Great job.